Greetings everyone, this is SteamTeamRedubUK, CC Trainor-Ling, here to bring you another episode review from Season 6 of The Loud House. Today's episode is titled, Crashed Course. First we'll discuss the plot, and then my thoughts and critiques with my final score. So, let's get right into it. In this episode, the kids head to Fairway University after assuming Lori is getting bad grades and might flunk out of college. They go undercover, including impersonating their sister in an effort to help her get her grades up, until it turns out the lower scores on her report cards are actually golf scores, and they unfortunately cause Lori to fail a very important golf exam. The episode ends with the real Lori taking the exam, and Coach Niblick giving her the passing grade she rightfully deserves. Well, that concludes the plot of the episode, so now we come to my thoughts and critiques. The story was the typical plotline where the main characters assume something is wrong based on very little information, and then try to resolve the problem, and it all turns out to be a complete misunderstanding. I guess the first thing I want to talk about is what sets the entire story in motion, and that would be Lori's report cards. I'll break this section of the review down into two parts. The first part is when the kids see a bunch of numbers between 62 and 68, and they think those are the grades she's been getting in class. Academically speaking, they weren't wrong for feeling concerned. Those numbers would mean Lori is getting D's in all her classes, and that would jeopardize her chances of getting into other courses that require at least a C and being able to graduate at all. In Lenny's defense to what she saw Lori posting on social media, those pictures did give the impression she may have been slacking off from her schoolwork and fell victim to the stereotypical college student mindset of being more into partying than studying. So on the one hand, I in good faith cannot fault the kids for assuming the worst case scenario about Lori and really wanting to help her out given those report card numbers and pictures. But on the other hand, they didn't really look into what those numbers actually meant, and that's where we come to the second part of those report cards. The kids only looked at the numbers and never actually read what was written next to them. It's one thing to hold an envelope up to a light and only read the number because you can't really see the words all too well, but I find it hard to believe that Lisa's high-resolution image scanner was able to look inside a similar unopened envelope and still not being able to decipher any of the written text. Going based on so many past examples of the certified genius known as Lisa conjuring up some kind of invention that she can use to her advantage, it felt oddly convenient that her own high-resolution image scanner couldn't get a clear and readable picture on what was written on the paper. I mean, yeah, I get how the writing looked like a bunch of scribbles, and perhaps the kids respect their sister's privacy enough to not open her personal mail, and I get that. However, given the supposed severity of the situation, you would think this would be one of those rare instances where reading that mail would be vital to their sister's future. Come to think of it, they could have opened up both letters and the entire conflict could have been avoided completely. But then we wouldn't have had a wacky Loud family adventure, now would we? But before I talk about that adventure, I just want to quickly acknowledge two more moments that are definitely worth noting. First, I found it a little strange how Lisa and the rest of her siblings were all taken by surprise when they found out low golf scores are actually a good thing. They've seen Lori play the game so many times in the past, and their sister once explained how golf scores work, so for the kids to conveniently forget something like that felt very unnatural with all things considered. And finally, I really didn't care for the moments where Niblick couldn't figure out the person he was observing on the golf course was not the real Lori. It's one of those visual gags that always comes off as a forced method to advance the plot, and that's especially true when the real Lori showed up and Niblick still believed the girl standing in front of him at that very moment was the same girl he was just watching screw up the golf exam minutes earlier. 3 different faces, 3 different voices, and yet he still thought it was the same exact person every time. I know it's cartoon logic, but still, it's a gag that never sits right with me. Now you're probably thinking I didn't like this episode whatsoever, but honestly, it's not all that bad. There were a few entertaining and interesting moments that stood out. These included the kids putting on all kinds of crazy disguises as they tried to keep Lori away from anything that could be considered a distraction from her schoolwork, as well as stalling for time so Lori could get back to Fairway after some of her sisters took her off campus, while Lisa and Lynn tried impersonating their eldest sister so they could take the exam on her behalf. And speaking of Lori, she was the best character of the episode even though her role was extremely limited compared to her siblings. This episode, in my opinion, was the best indicator of where she currently stood as both an avid golfer and a student at Fairway. As noted in her 2 report cards, her golf scores kept getting lower and lower, and that was a sign of progress. I believe the average golf score is anywhere between 90 and 100, and with a score as low as 62, clearly Lori is way beyond average and definitely not a slacker like her siblings thought she was. When your score is that close to anywhere between 50 and 59, which is undoubtedly the best you can possibly get, this episode proved once again that Lori is a hard worker, shows a lot of dedication and determination as a golfer, and being admitted into the prestigious Fairway University thanks to Coach Niblick was the best thing to ever happen to both her and the college. And even though although everything that happened was a total misunderstanding and nearly cost Lori a good grade, I liked how she didn't come down too hard on her siblings like you would have expected her to do in earlier seasons. To be fair, her siblings said she doesn't like it when they get involved in her problems, and their involvement in this episode kinda proved how true that statement actually was, but she also admitted that in their own way, their meddling showed how much they cared. When you consider how many times throughout the series where the kids interject themselves into many supposedly serious family conflicts, what Lori said made a lot of sense, and her siblings wouldn't have driven 3 hours to Fairway if they didn't care about their sister possibly flunking out of college and having to work some really pathetic jobs as a result. I mean, come on, they're the Loud family. Would you expect their thinking and behavior to be anything less than what we saw here? And finally, there were the cameos from the Casa Grande family that came in the forms of Bobby, Sergio, and Ronnie Ann. Or I guess in her case, a cameo in the form of the classic package prank she likes to pull on Lincoln from time to time. It was like a little callback to the episode Back Out There, only this time Lincoln has a scanner on his side to avoid getting nailed with whatever is hidden inside that box. Nice try, Ronnie Ann, but never underestimate the man with a plan. Overall, this was a pretty okay episode. Not too strong, but not too weak either. When thinking about what it took to push the story forward, the episode can be easily summarized as strangely convenient and how much of the conflict could have been avoided early on. This included the kids not doing enough to figure out what else was written on Lori's report cards without actually opening them, despite Lisa having the kind of technology that could actually do just that, Niblick being completely oblivious to who he was testing on the golf course, and the kids somehow being unaware of how golf scores work when they've seen their sister play the game so many times in the past. Still, all their hearts and minds were in the right place with good intentions, and they did provide some comedic moments with their many disguises and distractions. Lori proved that she's a well above average golfer, and I guess kinda showed that when you're that good, maybe a little goofing off with friends and social media is a well-earned reward for all the hard work you've put into what you're doing. Always gotta have a fun side, you know? With that said, I give Crashed Course a 7.4 out of 10. Well folks, that concludes my review of Crashed Course. I will end this review with something that caught my eye, and I couldn't stop thinking about it. Lucy was able to shut off Lori's electronic devices by waving her hand over them as she recited some magical incantation. Call it spooky, weird, and unrealistic all you want, but just like Lori, this proves Lucy is really committed to what she loves, and this was another example of how her character has grown from being mostly just talk in the early seasons to now having both the talk and walk when it comes to dabbling in the dark arts. It makes you wonder if she'd ever invoke a real working spell on her siblings like she tried to do in the episode Spell It Out. Now that I would like to see before the end of the series, but that's just me. So anyway, as far as the rest of the episode goes, what did you guys think of it? Love it? Hate it? Something you would add? Change? Keep it as it is? Let me know in the comments below, and make sure to subscribe to this channel for the latest Loud House content. That's going to do it for me. I'll catch you guys for the next video, but until then, this is SteamTeamRedubUK, CC Trainor-Ling, signing off. Peace out, home slices.